So I want you to just picture this for a second.
Yep.
You are standing right on the edge of a track.
Okay.
You're leaning up against this cold concrete barrier, right?
Right.
And the air around you is just thick. It's heavy with that sharp, unmistakable smell of high-octane racing fuel.
Oh, yeah, and burning rubber.
Exactly, that acrid scent of burning rubber. And down the straightaway, this pack of cars just comes screaming towards you. But if you listen closely, this isn't that smooth, predictable whine of, say, a Formula One race.
Not at all.
You hear this deafening, high-pitched screech of slick racing tires just fighting for grip on perfect tarmac.
And then it just shatters.
Yes, in the literal blink of an eye, the entire soundscape just violently fractures. That screech turns into this guttural, gravel-crunching roar as those exact same cars launch off the pavement and just violently plunge onto a section of loose, deeply rutted dirt.
Mud flying absolutely everywhere.
Completely coating the windshields. The engines are being pushed to their absolute breaking points, just bouncing off the rev limiters. And the drivers inside are violently wrestling their steering wheels. I mean, not just to make the corner, but just to keep these mechanical beasts facing in a vaguely forward direction.
Just surviving the transition.
Right. So what happens when you take the microscopic surgical precision of traditional track racing and forcefully collide it with the chaotic, sliding, mudslinging grit of rallying? Well, you are welcome to the Irish Rallycross Championship.
It is, without a doubt, one of the most punishing and technically demanding forms of motorsport on the planet. And to really understand it, I want you to build a theater of the mind right now.
Okay, let's do it.
Keep that image of the track in your head that you just described, but picture a split screen. On the left side, you have a pristine, beautifully painted, perfectly swept tarmac race circuit.
The precision side?
Right. And on the right side, a muddy, deeply grooved, completely unpredictable dirt trail through a forest. Rallycross forces a single vehicle and a single driver to master both of those completely contradictory environments within the exact same lap.
It's crazy when you think about it.
It really is. It is the constant, violent transition between absolute order and total chaos.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that transition is exactly what we are dissecting today. We have this enormous stack of sources outlining the history, the staggering engineering, the economic struggles, and of course, the standout stars of this entire motorsport ecosystem.
It's a massive ecosystem.
And it's officially regulated by Motorsport Ireland. Currently known, thanks to its dedicated sponsors, as the PartsforCars Irish Rallycross Championship, or the IRX for short.
Right.
In fact, if we were going to perfectly package this entire journey up today, say, crafting an Apple Podcast title and description to summarize what we are doing in this deep dive, the title would simply have to be Dirt, Tarmac, and Dominance inside the Irish Rallycross Championship.
I like that.
Yeah, and the description would read something like, dive into the high-octane world of the Irish Rallycross Championship, or IRX, in this comprehensive deep dive. We explore the grueling tracks of Mondello Park, decode the engineering marvels behind the Supercar and Modified classes, and trace the intense recent history of Motorsport Ireland's premier rallycross racing series. That covers a lot of ground. It does. It will continue with from snowed-out semifinals and gripping night races under floodlights to the unparalleled reign of multi-year champion Derek Tohill. Discover what makes auto racing in Ireland so resilient and thrilling. Whether you're a die-hard motorsport fan or a curious newcomer, join us as we unpack the grit, gears, and glory of Irish Rallycross.
Perfect.
And of course, we'd weave in those essential SEO keywords, things like Irish Rallycross Championship, IRX, Mondello Park, Motorsport Ireland, Derek Tohill, Rallycross Racing, Auto Racing Ireland, Motorsport History, and Supercars Racing. That is basically the blueprint for our mission today.
It's a brilliant blueprint because this isn't merely a timeline of who crossed the finish line first. When you dig into these documents, you realize this is a masterclass in mechanical ingenuity.
Yeah, survival, really.
Exactly. It is a study in institutional survival. We're watching how a local sporting body fights back against vicious winter weather, collapsing grid numbers, and obviously a global pandemic. But above all, it's about the people. The grassroots mechanics tuning engines in cold garages on a Tuesday night so they can go to battle on a Sunday.
Let's start with the battleground itself. If we rewind to the genesis of this championship in 1982, the organizers faced an immediate logistical nightmare.
They needed a home base?
Right. When you are trying to legitimize a brand new, highly destructive motorsport, you can't just operate like a traveling circus, tearing up a different farmer's field every weekend. You need infrastructure. You need a spiritual home. And for the IRX, That home became Mondello Park in County Kildare.
The cathedral of Irish motorsport.
Yeah, our sources show that in the early days, almost every single round was run right there at Mondello.
What's fascinating here is the psychological and mechanical dynamic that creates. Mondello Park isn't just a venue, it is the crucible that really forged Irish Rallycross. But relying on a single track is a massive double-edged sword.
How so?
Well, on one hand, it concentrates your resources. Rallycross is an exceptionally expensive sport. By centralizing at Mondello, the teams don't have to spend half their budget hauling cars and equipment across the country.
Or dealing with ferry costs across the sea.
Exactly. And the fans know exactly where the sport lives. But let's look at the downside. If a driver races on the exact same sequence of corners every single month for years, the track just becomes a matter of muscle memory.
Right, they could drive it with their eyes closed.
Yeah, and the challenge of motorsport is supposed to be the unknown. So to prevent the local veterans from essentially sleepwalking to victory, the Mondello organizers had to become architectural illusionists.
Right, because they couldn't physically move the grandstands or the timing towers, so they constantly changed the labyrinth itself.
Exactly. They would run the circuit clockwise one weekend, which tests how a car handles high-speed right-hand sweeps into the dirt transition. Then the next month, they would completely flip the script and run a reverse short circuit.
Which completely messes with your braking zones.
Completely. A corner that was previously a fast exit suddenly becomes a heavy braking zone. The transition from dirt to tarmac, which used to be an acceleration point, suddenly becomes the entry to a tight hairpin. It forces the drivers to constantly rewrite their internal pacing.
They have to relearn where the bumps are.
Where the mud gathers, where the grip completely vanishes. It's intense.
And that relentless pressure cooker environment at Mondello Park clearly produced some incredibly sharp drivers.
Yeah.
Because by the early 1990s, the local standard had gotten so high that the European Rallycross Championship actually brought around to Ireland.
That was a massive moment.
It feels like a monumental shift. I mean, it's one thing to be the fastest guy in your local pub, but it's another to have the heavyweight champion of the world walk in and challenge you to a fight.
That is the perfect analogy. Putting the Republic of Ireland on the European Rallycross map changed the DNA of the domestic sport forever.
Because suddenly they had a new benchmark.
Right. Before the European invasion, the local Irish drivers were measuring their success against each other. If your car was a tenth of a second faster than the guy in the next town over, you were a hero.
But then the Europeans arrived.
And they brought a different level of automotive warfare. Factory-backed budgets, exotic materials, specialized engineers. The local Irish mechanics suddenly found themselves in the paddock, staring at aerodynamic designs and suspension geometries they had literally never seen before.
It must have been intimidating.
It provided a brutal, unforgiving benchmark. But rather than folding, the Irish domestic field absorbed that knowledge. They elevated their own racecraft. They started building cars that could genuinely hold their own against the continent's best.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about the actual machines they were building. The class structure in the IRX is incredibly complex, but it's essentially the Rosetta Stone for understanding how the sport functions.
It really tells you everything about the ecosystem.
Yeah. Let's decode the grid, using the highly detailed data we have from the 2018 season as our lens. At the absolute bleeding edge of the sport, you have the supercar class. The rule book defines this class with a phrase that should terrify any normal driver.
Oh, I know the phrase.
Modified four-wheel drive cars with unlimited engine capacity. Unlimited.
It's madness.
In 2018, Derek Tohill dominated this class, alongside fierce competitors like Michael Coyne and Declan Kelly. And then you have the Super Final, which is essentially throwing all the lions and the gladiators into the ring together. The absolute fastest cars from the day, regardless of their original class, fighting in one last sprint.
The main event.
Exactly. Tohill usually ruled the Super Final too. But let's pause on that phrase for a second. Unlimited capacity. For someone who doesn't spend their weekends rebuilding carburetors, what does it actually mean to put an unlimited engine into a four-wheel drive car on a surface that is literally shifting underneath you?
It means you are trying to harness a controlled explosion. Let's break down the physics of a supercar. When we say unlimited capacity, we are talking about custom-built engines that can easily generate upwards of 600 horsepower.
Which is insane for a car that size.
To put that in perspective, these rallycross supercars can often accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour faster than a Formula One car. They can do it in under 2 seconds.
Under 2 seconds on dirt.
Well, a Formula One car does that on perfectly sticky, warm tarmac. A rallycross supercar has to unleash that violence on gravel and mud. If you put 600 horsepower exclusively to the rear wheels on a dirt track, the car would just instantly spin around in a circle.
Right, the tires would just vaporize.
Right. Into smoke, and you wouldn't move an inch forward. That is where the four-wheel drive system, and specifically the differentials, come into play.
Okay, let's clarify differentials, because that's a term that gets thrown around a lot in car circles. If I'm pushing a shopping cart around a corner in a grocery store, the wheels on the outside of the cart have to travel a further distance than the wheels on the inside of the cart, right?
Spot on. If the wheels on a solid axle were locked together and forced to spin at the exact same speed, your car would shudder and hop every time you tried to turn the steering wheel.
Because one wheel wants to go further than the other.
Right. A differential is the mechanical brain that allows the outside wheels to spin faster than the inside wheels during a turn. Now imagine the complexity of that mathematical equation in a rallycross supercar.
Right.
The car is entering a corner at 100 miles per hour. The front left tire is on smooth, grippy tarmac. The rear right tire is suspended in midair over a rut. And the other two tires are clawing through deep, slippery mud.
Every single tire is dealing with a different surface.
Exactly. The differentials in a supercar have to instantly, mechanically decide exactly how much of that 600 horsepower to send to each individual wheel in fractions of a second, just to prevent the car from violently spinning out of control.
The stress on those parts must be unbelievable.
The internal forces acting on those gearboxes and drive shafts are catastrophic. That is why competing in the supercar class requires an astronomical budget. You are basically paying for aerospace-level metallurgy just to keep the car from tearing itself apart.
That really makes the dominance of someone like Derek Tohill even more fascinating. He isn't just outdriving the field, his team is out-engineering them. They're managing that catastrophic stress better than anyone else.
It's a team sport, without a doubt.
But what I love about the IRX is that it isn't an exclusive country club for millionaires. The vast majority of the paddock is actually populated by the modified and production tiers.
The grassroots heroes.
Yeah, looking at the 2018 breakdown, we see the super modified class, where guys like Peter McGarry, Michael Coyne, and Lloyd Spinlove were trading paint. But then the rules get hyper-specific.
Yeah.
Very specific.
You have the 3A modified class. This is for two-wheel drive cars, but they can either use forced induction or have a normally aspirated engine larger than 2150cc.
Right.
And then right beside that, the 3B modified class restricts drivers strictly to normally aspirated engines under 2150cc, which is where Chris Grimes was winning. So let's untangle that jargon for a minute. Forced induction versus normally aspirated. What is the real-world difference when these guys hit the mud?
It's the difference between breathing naturally and having a leaf blower shoved into your mouth.
That is a very vivid image.
It's accurate. A normally aspirated engine relies entirely on atmospheric pressure. As the pistons move down, they create a vacuum, naturally sucking air into the engine to mix with the fuel.
So it's just pulling air in like we breathe. Right. An engine's cc, its cubic capacity, is essentially the size of its lungs. The bigger the cc, the more air it can suck in. The bigger the combustion, the more power it makes. That's why 3A and 3B are separated by that 2150cc boundary. It prevents a guy with a massive 4-liter engine from just bullying a guy with a small 1.6-liter engine on the straights.
And forced induction is the leaf blower.
Exactly. Forced induction means using a turbocharger or a supercharger. These are mechanical turbines that violently compress the air and force-feed it into the engine.
So you can cheat the displacement rule, basically.
Yeah, you can take a very small, lightweight engine, bolt a massive turbocharger to it, and suddenly it's producing the horsepower of a much larger, heavier engine.
So why doesn't everyone just use the turbocharger? It sounds like a no-brainer.
Because of a phenomenon called turbo lag. It takes a second for the exhaust gases to spin that turbine up to speed. When a driver steps on the gas pedal in a turbocharged car, there is a brief moment of hesitation.
Nothing happens.
Nothing happens, and then followed by a violent, sudden surge of power. On slick tarmac, that's great. But imagine you are mid-corner on a slippery mud surface, balancing the car on the edge of traction.
Oh, man.
You press the throttle, nothing happens, and then suddenly 300 horsepower kicks in all at once. The tires instantly break traction, and you spin straight into the wall.
So a normally aspirated engine, while maybe having less peak horsepower, delivers that power in a smooth, predictable, linear line.
Precisely. The throttle response is instant. If the driver presses the pedal 10%, they get exactly 10% of the power. It allows for microscopic adjustments in grip. And remember, these modified classes are two-wheel drive.
Right, they don't have the fancy differentials.
They don't have the sophisticated all-wheel drive differentials of the supercars to save them. Driving a high-powered two-wheel drive car on a wet dirt track is like trying to run a sprint on an ice rink while wearing bowling shoes.
Just slipping everywhere.
It requires a delicate, almost balletic level of throttle control.
That makes sense.
So if we connect this to the bugger picture, by structuring these classes so meticulously, separating the turbo cars from the naturally aspirated cars, and the big engines from the small engines, the IRX organizers created a brilliantly democratic ecosystem.
It levels the playing field.
Exactly. They ensured that if you are a wizard at tuning small, naturally aspirated engines in your home garage, you have a distinct championship to fight for, without being obliterated by a factory team. It prevents the sport from becoming exclusively a billionaire's playground.
It's a mechanic's dream.
Yeah.
And the sheer variety of vehicles really proves it. Moving down that 2018 list, you have the 16V production class for standard cars, won by Ciaran Murphy. You have an entire subset of rally cars.
Right, the actual stage rally car.
Yeah, adapted for this circuit format. You've got
Good.
Class 9 for the smaller engines, won by Patricia Denning. Class 9A for the mid-range, won by Jack Deegan. And the heavyweight Class 9B for the big turbocharged 4WD machines, won by Joe Downey.
The heavy hitters.
But if you want a purely visceral experience, you really have to look at the buggy class. This was dominated by Russell Woods in 2018. A buggy is essentially taking the concept of a car, throwing away the doors, the roof, the windshield, the interior, and leaving nothing but a tubular steel roll cage, 4 wheels, and a screaming engine.
It's the ultimate power-to-weight ratio.
It looks terrifying. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have the Fiesta class, which is spec racing. Everyone drives the exact same standard Ford Fiesta. David Marr won that in 2018.
Spec racing is pure driving skill.
Exactly. Because your wallet cannot buy you an advantage. The only difference between first and last place, the organic meat sack sitting behind the steering wheel.
The driver.
But as fascinating as all this engineering is, I have a massive bone to pick with the next category on our list, the junior class.
Ah, the incubator of Irish motorsport.
Incubator is a very polite word for it. Let's look at the facts here. In 2018, the junior podium was Jack Byrne, Connor Kehoe, and Michael Ryan. This class is strictly for 14 to 16-year-olds.
Young talent.
We are putting 14-year-olds into stripped-down, standard 1-liter cars and sending them out onto a mixed surface track at high speeds alongside a pack of other highly aggressive teenagers. I have to challenge you on this.
Okay, go ahead.
A 14-year-old's brain is literally still developing.
Yeah.
They lack impulse control. I mean, they can't legally drive to the grocery store, yet we expect them to make split-second life-or-death decisions while hurtling toward a concrete barrier at 80 miles per hour. How is this sanctioned, let alone safe? I mean, think about what you were doing at 14 compared to these kids.
Look, I completely understand the hesitation. From the outside, it sounds like absolute madness.
It really does.
But let's look at the reality of the physics, the safety regulations, and the psychology of driver development. First, consider the environment. A racetrack is a closed, strictly controlled, unidirectional environment.
Meaning everyone goes the same way.
Everyone is going the same way. There are no intersections, no pedestrians, no oncoming traffic, no stoplights. From a purely statistical standpoint, hurtling down the Mondello Straight at 80 miles per hour in a heavily modified race car is significantly safer than driving 60 miles per hour on a rural public road in the rain.
Because of the safety gear, I assume.
Exactly. These aren't standard 1-liter cars you'd find at a dealership. Yes, the engine is standard. It produces very little horsepower, maybe 60 or 70 horsepower tops. But the interior is completely gutted. It is reinforced with a heavily engineered steel roll cage.
So it's basically a shell.
A very strong shell. The teenage driver is strapped into a specialized racing seat with a 5-point harness, wearing a fireproof suit, a fireproof balaclava, a homologated crash helmet, and a Hans device.
What's a Hans device?
It's a head and neck support system. It prevents their neck from snapping forward in a severe impact. The cars are built like tanks. But more importantly, let's talk about what the lack of horsepower actually teaches them.
Right, because they can't rely on brute force to get out of trouble.
Precisely. If you put a teenager in a 600 horsepower supercar, yes, that is a recipe for disaster. But in a 1-liter junior car, the acceleration is incredibly slow. The entire art of racing that car is about maintaining momentum.
Don't touch the brakes unless you have to.
Exactly. If a 14-year-old panics and brakes too hard entering a corner, they don't just lose a fraction of a second. The car bogs down, and it takes them halfway down the next straightaway just to build their speed back up. They get passed by 5 cars instantly.
So it punishes bad driving.
It forcibly teaches them the physics of weight transfer. They learn how to balance the car on the edge of traction without scrubbing off speed. They learn how to read the dirt, how to anticipate the slide.
It's all about finesse.
Yes. By the time someone like Jack Byrne reaches the age of 17, his synaptic responses to a vehicle losing traction are hardwired. He doesn't have to think about correcting a slide. His hands just do it automatically.
It's instinctive.
This class is the exact reason why Irish drivers are so formidable on the international stage. They learn the absolute limits of vehicle dynamics years before they ever set foot in a driving school.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You are teaching them the grammar of racing before giving them the megaphone of horsepower.
Beautifully put.
And they need every ounce of that foundational skill because rallycross is an outdoor sport and nature has a nasty habit of throwing the rule book out the window. Which brings us right into the narrative core of our deep dive today, the wildly tumultuous 2019 season.
Oh, 2019, what a year.
If you were writing a movie script about institutional resilience, you would base it on the IRX in 2019. It began with this overwhelming sense of optimism. On February 17th of 2019, the organizers held a massive media launch at Mondello Park.
Big event.
Huge. The championship manager, Leo Nolte, stood up and confidently declared that the IRX was in its best position in many years. And he really had the receipts to prove it. They had locked down a massive roster of sponsors.
Which is lifeblood for a series.
Completely. PartsforCars stepped up as the title sponsor, which is a massive injection of capital. They were joined by Diamond Bright, IPRS Limited, Riggs, 4Gigs, and MRCM Roofing. The grits were healthy, the marketing was polished, and everyone was ready for a golden era to begin.
When a grassroots motorsport organization secures that level of corporate backing, it completely changes the atmosphere in the paddock. The organizers can stop worrying about how to pay for the track marshals and the ambulances, and they can start focusing on improving the spectacle of the racing.
The drivers feel validated, too.
Exactly. But motorsport, at its core, is a battle against the elements, and the elements decided to test that optimism immediately.
Nature completely rejected their script. Exactly 2 weeks after that sunny, optimistic media launch, everyone arrived back at the Mondello Park short circuit for round 1 on March 3rd, and they were met with an absolute freezing nightmare.
Snow.
A massive snowstorm hit the track. The temperature plummeted. The event had to be completely abandoned and canceled midway through the day, right after the first round of semifinals.
Try to conceptualize what it takes to drive a race car in a snowstorm. We talked earlier about the challenge of transitioning from smooth tarmac to loose dirt. Now introduce sub-zero temperatures.
The track must be like glass.
The smooth tarmac isn't just cold, it becomes a literal layer of black ice. The specialized racing tires these drivers use are designed to heat up and become sticky, like chewing gum, to grip the road. In a snowstorm, those tires turn to hard plastic. They offer absolutely zero friction.
And what about the dirt section?
It freezes solid. The mud ruts become jagged, concrete-like trenches filled with snow.
And I imagine visibility drops to zero?
It's terrifying. You have mud, sleet, and freezing rain being violently thrown directly at your windshield by the spinning tires of the car in front of you. The windshield wipers are freezing to the glass.
The poor mechanics?
Mechanics in the paddock are frantically trying to figure out how to keep the engine oil from turning to sludge. The fact that the drivers managed to navigate those conditions all the way through the semifinals without a major catastrophe is a monumental testament to their car control.
And incredibly, the officials decided that the results from those frozen semifinals would actually stand for the championship points.
They had to take something away from the day.
Right. Derek Tohill managed to slide his way to the supercar and super final points. Michael Coyne survived to take the modified points. Thomas O'Rafferty took Rallycars. Padraig McHale won the Buggies, Dennis McCrudden took the Fiestas, and young Jack Byrne navigated the ice to win the juniors.
Surviving the ice.
They scraped their points together and tried to keep the momentum going. In April, for round 2, they packed up and moved west to the Palace karting track in Tyna, where Noel Green actually managed to upset Tohill in the supercars, and Willie Coyne took the modified win.
A little change of scenery.
Yeah, and they returned to Mondello in May for round 3 on a reverse short circuit, where Tohill resumed his reign. In July, they ran round 4 as a highly marketed Retromania event. Tohill won again, Padraig Leeson took modified, and Brendan McCaughan won the juniors. But beneath the surface of these results, a slow-moving crisis was developing.
The enthusiasm was fading.
The enthusiasm from February was bleeding out. Grid numbers were dropping. And then on October 15th, the bottom completely fell out.
This is the brutal, unspoken economic reality of running a national racing championship.
Mondello Park was forced to release a statement announcing the absolute unthinkable. They were officially canceling rounds 5 and 6, which were heavily promoted as a double-header weekend.
The devastating.
The stated reason: alarmingly low entry numbers. Despite the title sponsors and the media push, they simply didn't have enough cars turning up to physically run the races.
This is the dreaded domino effect in grassroots motorsport. Let's break down why grids shrink mid-season. It usually comes down to attrition.
Parts breaking.
Right. In round 1 and 2, everyone's car is fresh. By round 4, engines have blown up, gearboxes have shattered, suspensions have been bent against concrete walls. Rebuilding a competitive rallycross car mid-season requires a massive injection of cash.
Cash that a lot of these weekend racers just don't have.
Exactly. If a driver runs out of budget in July, they don't show up in October. When a few key drivers drop out, the grid looks thin. When the grid looks thin, the racing becomes a procession rather than a dogfight.
And the fans notice.
The spectators notice this, and they stop buying tickets. When the spectators stop showing up, the local sponsors start questioning their investment. It's a vicious, accelerating cycle. Canceling the penultimate rounds of a season isn't just a logistical hiccup, it is a massive distress flare.
It signals the ship is sinking.
It signals to the entire motorsport community that the championship is structurally failing.
It was a code-red emergency for the organizers. If they canceled the final round, the 2019 season would end on a whimper, the sponsors would likely walk away, and the entire IRX could have collapsed. The very next week, the Motorsport Ireland Rallycross Commission held an urgent crisis meeting.
They had to do something.
They had to figure out a way to save the final round scheduled for November 24th. And what they engineered in that room is, for my money, one of the most brilliant administrative pivots in modern racing.
I agree completely.
I call it the Midnight Miracle. On November 7th, they announced that the final round was back on. But they didn't just apologize and run a standard Sunday afternoon race. First, they slashed the entry fees to drastically lower the financial barrier and coax the broken teams back out of their garages.
Get the cars back on the grid.
But the masterstroke was that they introduced the first ever race into the night in the history of the IRX. They rented massive stadium floodlights and illuminated the Mondello track against the pitch-black November sky.
Brilliant marketing.
So what does this all mean? Stepping back for a moment, how exactly does plunging a racetrack into darkness change the physical reality of the sport?
It completely rewrites the sensory experience of racing. The transition from daylight to floodlights is not just an aesthetic change, it alters the fundamental physics of the track.
Like the temperature.
First thing, when the sun goes down in Ireland in late November, the track temperature plummets instantly. As the tarmac cools down, the tires lose their grip. The dirt section, deprived of sunlight, begins to gather dew and becomes incredibly slick.
So it's like a different track entirely.
The drivers suddenly find themselves driving on a surface that has vastly less friction than it did during their daytime practice sessions.
So the car behaves completely differently. But what about the human element? What happens to the driver's brain?
That is where the real challenge lies. The human eye relies on shadows to judge distance and depth. Under artificial stadium floodlights, shadows stretch in bizarre, unnatural directions.
They get distorted.
They flicker through the roll cage. The apex of a corner, the exact millimeter where a driver needs to turn the steering wheel, suddenly looks like it's 10 feet further away than it actually is.
Your eyes are lying to you.
Your depth perception is constantly being lied to by the lighting. The drivers essentially have to rely on their peripheral vision and the tunnel of light cutting through the darkness.
But the spectacle of it.
What makes this pivot so utterly brilliant from a marketing standpoint is the atmosphere it creates. Rallycross is already violent, but at night, it becomes a cinematic spectacle.
The visuals must be insane.
The brake discs heat up to 800 degrees and glow cherry red in the dark. Unburned fuel from the exhaust hits the hot exhaust pipe and spits massive, bright orange flames into the night sky on every single downshift.
Wow.
The sparks from the cars bottoming out over the dirt ruts look like fireworks. The organizers didn't just save a race, they manufactured a gladiatorial spectacle that was so viscerally compelling, the drivers physically couldn't resist showing up, and the fans had to be there to witness it.
And it works flawlessly. The grid filled back up, the fans returned, and the November 24th finale was a massive success. Derek Tohill, proving he could master the dark just as well as the snow, won the night race, locking up the 2019 Supercar and Superfinal championships.
A true champion's drag.
Willie Coyne danced his modified car under the lights to secure his title. Shane Stanley won the final Rallycar race, although Thomas O'Rafferty had already built up enough points to win the championship. Pat Ballou won the Buggies, helping Drake McHale secure that title. Mark Meanahan took the Fiesta win, cementing Dennis McCrudden's overall championship.
Everyone showing up when it mattered.
And in the juniors, Michael Ryan won the dramatic night race, while Jack Byrne, the kid who won in the snowstorm, was crowned the overall 2019 junior champion. They survived the elements, they survived the economic slump, and they ended 2019 on a massive high. But they had absolutely no idea what was lurking just around the corner in 2020.
Nobody in the world did.
Right. We move into the COVID-19 era, 2020 and 2021. This period is defined by a brutal, forced pause, but not before the sport delivered an incredible tease of what the momentum from that night race had built.
The 2020 opener.
The 2020 season kicked off on March 8th on the Mondello clockwise circuit. The energy was electric. There was a massive 48-car grid.
Which is huge.
Just to put that in perspective, the modified class alone had 12 cars lined up. The Midnight Miracle had worked. The sport was healthy again. But there was a glaring, bizarre anomaly in the paddock that morning.
Tohill's choice of car.
Yes. Derek Tohill, the reigning, undisputed, all-conquering 2019 champion, showed up to defend his title. But he didn't bring his monstrous 600-horsepower, unlimited four-wheel drive supercar Fiesta out onto the grid.
He left it at home.
Instead, he completely dropped down a tier. He entered the modified class, driving a significantly less powerful, naturally aspirated two-wheel drive Fiesta.
It was a shock to everyone.
And incredibly, fighting against a massive grid of specialized 2WD cars, he still managed to finish on the podium in third place. Meanwhile, with the apex predator out of the supercar class, Tommy Graham seized the opportunity and took the round one supercar victory.
Good for Tommy.
What this tells us about the wider sport, and about Tohill specifically, is fascinating. Why on earth does a dominant champion, at the peak of his powers, deliberately handicap himself at the start of a new season?
It is one of the most intriguing psychological moves a driver can make. When you have access to the most technologically advanced, dominant piece of machinery in the country, and you choose to leave it in the garage to wrestle a two-wheel drive car in a lower class, you are making a profound statement.
What's the statement, though? Was his main car just broken?
We can look at this from a few different angles. The most pragmatic explanation is mechanical failure. Perhaps the supercar suffered a catastrophic engine issue on the dyno the night before, and the 2WD modified car was simply his backup vehicle. If you want to score championship points, you drive whatever has four wheels and an engine.
True. But there might be more to it.
Let's look deeper at the psychology of a champion. Once you have completely mastered a four-wheel drive supercar, once you have proven you can win in the snow and win in the dark, the challenge starts to fade.
Yeah, bored.
Right. Driving a highly tuned two-wheel drive car on a mixed surface track is, in many ways, a purer, more difficult test of raw car control. A 4WD system can mask a driver's mistakes.
It corrects for you.
Exactly. If you enter a corner too hot, the front differentials can pull you out of the slide. In a 2WD car, if you break traction, you are entirely reliant on your own steering inputs and throttle balance to save the car.
It's all on you.
Tohill might have dropped down simply in pursuit of that pure, unadulterated driving challenge. He wanted to prove that his dominance wasn't just a product of an expensive engine, but of his own fundamental skill. And taking third place in a 12-car grid in a lower class absolutely proves that point.
It's a brilliant storyline, the champion testing his own mortality. But we will never know how that season would have played out, because just 4 days after that massive, triumphant 48-car race, the world stopped turning.
Everything shut down.
On March 12, 2020, Motorsport Ireland issued an urgent statement postponing all motorsport events due to the rapidly escalating coronavirus pandemic. 8 days later, on March 20th, a final, grim statement suspended all events until at least June.
And that stretched much longer.
As the reality of lockdown set in, the entire remainder of the 2020 IRX calendar, the April, July, October, and November rounds, were completely wiped off the board. The track went entirely silent.
The contrast must have been jarring. Mondello Park is a place defined by violent noise and constant motion. To have it locked down, empty, with grass starting to grow through the cracks in the paddock is a stark image.
It's very apocalyptic.
For the drivers and the mechanics, this wasn't just the loss of a hobby. Grassroots motorsport is a deeply ingrained community. It's where you see your friends, it's where you blow off steam. But the mechanical consequence of that lockdown is equally fascinating.
Because they had time to tinker.
Because the drivers were forced to stay home, they retreated to their garages. You had hundreds of mechanics across Ireland with nothing to do but stare at their race cars for over a year.
They had the one thing they never usually have time.
Exactly. In a normal season, you are rushing to patch the car together between a race in October and a race in November. You use duct tape, zip ties, and hope. During the lockdown, they had time to completely strip the cars down to the bare chassis.
Oh man, the upgrades.
They had time to rebuild gearboxes with absolute precision. They had time to experiment with new suspension geometries. The lockdown essentially turned the entire IRX paddock into a tightly coiled spring of mechanical anticipation.
And that spring finally, violently uncoiled in the late summer of 2021. The rebirth of the championship. Due to the lingering COVID restrictions, they couldn't start until July 11, 2021. The organizers had to condense a furious 5-round sprint of a season.
All at Mondello.
Running exclusively on the Mondello Park clockwise circuit between July and December to minimize travel logistics. What a return it was. We have to talk about the return of the king.
Tohill.
Whatever Derek Tohill was trying to prove in 2020 with that two-wheel drive Fiesta, he clearly got it out of his system. Because in 2021, he wheeled the unlimited supercar back out of the garage and he unleashed absolute hell on the field.
He was on a mission.
He went on a rampage that is almost unprecedented. He won round 1, he won round 2, he won round 3, he won round 4, he won round 5. He completely swept the season, claiming the 2021 Supercar and Super Final championships. Tommy Graham managed to steal one single Super Final win in round 2. But other than that, Tohill was completely, utterly untouchable.
That level of dominance after an 18-month hiatus is staggering. When an athlete steps away from a high-speed, high-reflex sport for a year and a half, you expect ring rust.
You expect them to be a little slow off the line.
You expect their reaction times to have slowed by a few milliseconds. You expect them to be tentative under braking. Tohill's sweep proves that he didn't let his mind or his machinery degrade during the lockdown. He came back sharper, more aggressive, and more perfectly tuned than he was in 2019. It is the absolute mark of a sporting dynasty.
And he wasn't the only one who came out of the lockdown swinging. The entire paddock was rejuvenated. In the modified class, Alan Crockett drew first blood in round 1, but then Peter McGarry came surging back to take rounds 2 and 3 before Philip Kelly found his rhythm and closed out the season with wins in rounds 4 and 5.
A great three-way battle.
It was a brilliant battle. In the production and open clubman class, Keith Kershaw took the opener, and Ken Power bookended it with a win in round 5. The Rallycars saw familiar faces, with Thomas O'Rafferty returning to win round 4 and Keith Power taking round 5.
The buggy class was intense too.
Those stripped-down, visceral cages were incredibly fierce. Jake O'Sullivan dominated the early part of the condensed season, taking the first 3 rounds. But Padraig Leeson adapted and took round 4, and the veteran Padraig McHale returned to take round 5.
And the spec Fiestas.
In the Fiesta Z-Tech class, Michael Ryan secured 3 victories, while Christopher Grimes Jr. and Ben Mullins grabbed the others. And crucially, in the junior class, a new name stamped his authority on the sport. Laughlin Farrell won 3 rounds and claimed the 2021 Junior Championship,
showing that the pipeline of young talent had survived the pandemic intact.
Damian Farrell also grabbed a junior win, and Davey Aiken took a victory in the Retro RX class. It was a massive, desperately needed injection of life back into Mondello Park.
It proved that the heart of the sport was still beating, and that momentum carried seamlessly forward.
It exploded forward into 2022. As the final COVID-19 restrictions were lifted, the IRX returned to complete normality. The organizers boldly scheduled a full, grueling 7-round season, all anchored at the Mondello Park Rallycross circuits, stretching from a freezing February 13th opener all the way to a December 11th finale.
A proper season.
And the Tohill dynasty simply refused to yield. The records show Derek Tohill picking up the exact same sledgehammer he was swinging in 2021. He won the Supercar and Super Final classes in the opening rounds of 2022, absolutely cementing his legacy as the defining driver of this modern era of Irish Rallycross.
No ring rust, no mercy.
We saw the intense rivalries continue across the board. Philip Kelly and Peter McGarry resumed their dogfight in the modified class. Keith Kershaw and Jason McConnon were battling in the open clubman and Fiesta Z-Tech classes.
Good racing everywhere you looked.
Patricia Denning and Shane Mulligan were trading victories in the heavy rally cars, while Padraig Leeson and Connor Shaw took the early spoils in the buggy class. And the next generation continued to evolve, with Joshua Power emerging to absolutely dominate the early rounds of the junior class. The ecosystem had completely healed.
It had.
But before we conclude this journey, we have to recognize that the Irish Rallycross Championship, with all its deep complexities and gripping narratives, does not exist in a vacuum.
No, it is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. To truly appreciate what makes the IRX special, we need to take a step back and examine the broader landscape of Irish motorsport.
Which is vast.
The documentation we have outlines the active motorsport championships across the Republic of Ireland, and the sheer volume and variety of racing happening on that island is staggering. It is a deeply embedded, culturally significant obsession.
It really is. We aren't just talking about a few guys racing on a Sunday. There is a deeply organized, massive infrastructure.
Precisely. Let's organize this dizzying array of leagues to understand the scale. First, you have an entire world dedicated to open-wheel racing, cars that look like miniature Formula One cars. You have the Formula V Championships, Boss S Ireland, and the Irish Strikers. These are pure aerodynamic track weapons.
Very fast, very technical.
Then you shift over to the saloon and sports car categories, which is massive. You have the Irish Supercars, the ITCC Future Classics Racing for the vintage purists. You have the Seat Super Cup, massive grids of Fiesta Zetec and Fiesta STs, the Ginetta Junior Ireland Series, and the Global Lights.
And that's just the circuit racing.
Exactly. Step off the smooth tarmac, and you enter the massive world of Irish rallying. This is where drivers race against the clock on closed public roads and forest trails. You have the National Rally Championship, the iconic Irish Tarmac Rally Championship, the gritty Irish Forest Rally Championship, and an entire network of regional battles.
Like the Southeast Stages.
The Midlands East, West Coast, and the Border Rally Championship. And the motorsport diversity keeps expanding. You have precise technical hill climbs and sprints up mountain roads. You have endurance racing. You have high-speed, sideways drifting with the Drift Games Nationals. You have grassroots autocross happening on loose gravel and wet glass fields.
There's something for everyone.
And then, sitting right alongside our Rallycross deep dive, you have a massive stock car and oval racing scene. You have the Legends, the Hot Rods, the National and Premier classes, production classes, and my absolute personal favorite category name in all of motorsport, the Nudge and Spin class.
You cannot beat a class officially titled Nudge and Spin. It perfectly captures the chaotic joy of grassroots racing. But what does all of this actually mean? Why does a relatively small island nation have such a massive, sprawling obsession with making cars go fast?
It speaks to a deeply rooted mechanical culture. In Ireland, knowing how to fix an engine, how to tune a suspension, and how to drive a car on the ragged edge of control is viewed with immense cultural respect.
It's an athletic pursuit.
Motorsport isn't just a fringe hobby. It is a respected athletic and engineering pursuit. And the infrastructure supports that. This entire ecosystem feeds into prestigious, nationally recognized awards.
The trophies.
You have historic hardware like the Hawthorne Trophy and the Leinster Trophy. You have the Billy Coleman Award, which honors the Young Rally Driver of the Year, and the Sexton Trophy for the Young Racing Driver of the Year.
Those are huge deals.
These aren't just plastic cups handed out in a parking lot. These are highly coveted honors that can launch a young driver, perhaps one of those 14-year-olds we talked about in the junior rallycross class, into a professional international racing career. Rallycross, with all of its mud, its noise, and its glory, is just one incredibly bright facet of this massive cultural diamond.
It is a remarkable ecosystem. And when you look back at the journey the IRX has taken, you begin to understand why it survives. This is a championship that faced a literal freezing snowstorm that turned the track into a hockey rink in March of 2019.
It survived that.
It faced dwindling grid numbers and economic realities that forced the terrifying cancellation of events. It survived the unprecedented silent shutdown of a global pandemic that kept the cars locked in their garages for over a year. And it didn't just survive those crises, it actively innovated its way out of them.
It got stronger.
When things looked the absolute bleakest, the organizers had the vision to pivot. They slashed entry fees, they rented stadium lights, and they engineered a breathtaking night race to save the season.
That midnight miracle.
It is a sport driven by a passion that spans generations. From the veteran engineers trying to tame unlimited four-wheel drive supercars, all the way down to the 14-year-old kids in 1-liter hatchbacks desperately learning how to master momentum and traction in the junior class.
And I think that brings us to the core takeaway for all of us, whether we ever sit behind the wheel of a race car or not. Progress, whether it is in maintaining a national motorsport championship or navigating our own lives, rarely happens on a perfectly smooth, perfectly swept, predictable track.
Life is messy.
Progress often requires a violent pivot. Just like those organizers did when they decided to light up the night sky, sometimes you have to completely change your paradigm to survive a crisis. And much like the drivers in Rallycross, learning to master the different surfaces in life, knowing when to put your foot down on the smooth stretches, and knowing how to delicately balance the throttle when you hit the sliding, muddy, chaotic moments, is what builds ultimate resilience.
Mastering the transitions. Knowing how to carry your momentum from the tarmac into the dirt without losing control.
Precisely. But before we close the book on this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over. We have spent this entire hour marveling at the mechanics and the soul of this sport. We have talked extensively about those roaring, fuel-heavy, fire-spitting 600-horsepower combustion engines.
The loud ones.
But we are living in a world defined by the rapid, seemingly unstoppable advancement of electric vehicles. It is only a matter of time. How long will it be before those screaming, violently loud combustion engines in the Irish Rallycross Championship are forced by regulation to transition to silent, instant torque electric motors?
Wow.
And when that happens, what changes? Will a fully electric IRX lose its gritty, visceral, deafening soul? Or, because electric motors deliver 100% of their torque instantly to all four wheels, will the racing become even faster, even more violent, and even more thrilling?
That is an incredible visual to ponder. Imagine standing against that concrete barrier, watching a pack of supercars launch off the tarmac into the mud, throwing gravel everywhere, drifting inches from each other in complete, eerie silence.
It would be a totally different breed of monster.
We will have to wait and see what the future holds for the mud and tarmac of Mondello Park. Thank you so much for joining us on this massive journey into the grit, the gears, and the glory of the Irish Rallycross Championship. Keep looking closely at the sources around you, keep asking questions about how things work, and we will see you on the next deep dive.